The diplomatic vessel hung in the void between stars, its running lights blinking steadily against the darkness. Captain Jay Huang stood on the bridge, watching the view screen with careful eyes. Beside him, Ambassador Hana Lee smoothed down her formal jacket for the third time in 10 minutes. She was nervous, and Jay didn't blame her. First contact with an alien species was always tense. The Velcrin ships appeared without warning. One moment, the space ahead was empty. The next, massive warships materialized from faster-than-light travel. Jay counted 12 of them, each one larger than any human vessel ever built. Their hulls were dark and angular, covered in what looked like organic armor plating. Weapons ports lined their sides like the teeth of some deep-sea predator. Hannah stepped forward and activated the communication channel. Her voice was calm and professional. "This is Ambassador Hana Lee of the United Human Systems. We come in peace and friendship. We seek dialogue and mutual understanding between our peoples." The response came quickly, but it wasn't what anyone had hoped for. The face that appeared on the screen was humanoid, but distinctly alien. Gray skin stretched over sharp bones. 4 eyes, arranged in a square pattern, stared out from the face with cold intelligence. The creature wore what appeared to be military insignia across its chest. "I am High Overlord Threnzak of the Velcrin Empire," the alien said. Its voice was harsh and grating, translated by the ship's computer. "You will surrender your vessels immediately. Your species will submit to Velcrin authority. You will provide us with the coordinates of all human settlements. Resistance will result in your immediate destruction." Jay felt his jaw tighten. Hana raised her hand slightly, a signal for him to stay quiet. She kept her diplomatic smile in place. "High Overlord, we appreciate your contact, but we cannot agree to those terms. Humanity is a sovereign species. We would be happy to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, or mutual defense pacts. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting on neutral ground?" Threnzak's face twisted into what might have been a sneer. "You misunderstand your position, human. The Velcrin Empire controls 847 star systems. We have conquered 233 species. Your kind occupies 3 insignificant systems in the outer reaches. You have no military strength. You have no allies. You have nothing we want except your obedience." Jay stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. "High Overlord, I strongly advise you to reconsider. Humanity may be small, but we are not weak. We are not prey. If you choose aggression, you will regret it." The alien laughed. It was an unpleasant sound, like rocks grinding together. "You threaten us? You, with your primitive ships and your limited territory? The Velcrin Empire has existed for 12,000 years. We have crushed civilizations far greater than yours. You will learn your place, human, or you will learn what happens to those who refuse Velcrin authority." The communication cut off. Jay immediately turned to his crew. "All hands, battle stations. Raise shields. Power up weapons. Helm, prepare for evasive maneuvers." But the Velcrin ships didn't attack. They simply turned and jumped away, vanishing as quickly as they had arrived. The bridge crew exchanged confused glances. Hannah looked at Jay with concern in her eyes. "Why didn't they attack?" she asked. Jay shook his head. "I don't know, but I don't like it. They're planning something. We need to get back to Earth immediately and report this." 3 days later, the news arrived. The colony on Kepler 442b had gone silent. When the defense fleet arrived to investigate, they found only ruins. The entire planet had been bombarded from orbit. Cities were reduced to molten slag. The atmosphere was choked with ash and radiation. 2.3 million people had lived on Kepler 442b. Now there were none. The Velcrin ships had jumped in, destroyed everything, and Left.J stood in the emergency meeting room on Earth, surrounded by military commanders and government officials. The mood was dark and angry. On the screens around the room, images from Kepler 442b played on repeat. Burning cities, shattered homes, the blackened crater where New Seoul had stood. Counselor Yuri Kang spoke first, his voice tight with controlled rage. They murdered our people. 2 million innocents. They didn't target military installations. They didn't demand surrender. They just killed everyone. General Sung-Beek, head of Strategic Command, leaned forward. This was a message. They wanted to show us what happens when we refuse them. They think this will make us surrender. Hannah was there too. Her diplomatic composure finally cracked. Her eyes were red from crying. We tried to talk to them. We offered peace. They chose this. Admiral Sue Park, commander of Earth's 7th Fleet, stood up. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp features. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion 20 years ago. She knew war. The question now is simple. Do we surrender, or do we fight? The room fell silent. Everyone knew what surrender meant. The Velkrans had made it clear. Humanity would become slaves, another conquered species in their empire. But fighting meant war against an enemy that controlled hundreds of star systems. An enemy that had just demonstrated its willingness to commit genocide. J spoke quietly, but his voice carried through the room. They think we're weak because we're small. They think we'll be easy to conquer because we only have 3 systems. They don't understand us at all. Yuri Kang nodded slowly. They've never fought humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. They don't know what we do when someone hurts our people. General Sung-Beek activated a holographic display. It showed human space, all 3 systems. Then it showed the Velkran Empire, vast and sprawling. They have the advantage in numbers, in territory, in resources. But they made a critical mistake. They attacked our civilians first. They made this personal. Admiral Sue Park smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They wanted to send us a message. I think it's time we sent them one back. The vote was unanimous. Humanity declared war on the Velkran Empire. Emergency protocols activated across all 3 human systems. Shipyards went into overdrive. Factories retooled for war production. Civilians enlisted in the millions. Every human, from Earth to the furthest colony, understood what was at stake. The Velkrans had seen humanity as prey, as another weak species to be conquered and enslaved. They had killed human civilians to prove their strength. They had expected fear and surrender. Instead, they had awakened something they didn't understand. Something that had evolved on a death world called Earth. Something that had survived ice ages and plagues and countless wars. Something that remembered every wrong and never forgave. They had awakened humanity's capacity for total war. And they were about to learn why that was the worst mistake they could have made. The Velkran invasion fleet arrived at the 2nd human system exactly 2 weeks after the Kepler 442b massacre. High Overlord Threnzak commanded from his flagship, confident in his overwhelming numbers. 300 warships against whatever primitive defenses the humans could muster. He expected the conquest to take less than a day. Lieutenant Narration sat in the cockpit of her fighter, waiting in the darkness between the planets. Around her, 50,000 other human pilots did the same. Their ships were small and fast, equipped with stealth technology the Velkrans didn't know existed. They had been waiting here for 9 days, floating silent and cold, living on recycled air and nutrient packs. Nari checked her weapons one more time. Missiles armed, railgun loaded, emergency systems ready. She thought about the images from Kepler 442b. She had friends there. A cousin who had just started university. All gone now. Murdered from orbit by aliens who thought humans were too weak to fight back, the Velcron fleet came out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Their ships were massive and powerful, bristling with weapons. Threnzak watched his tactical display with satisfaction. The human defense fleet was there, waiting for him. 20 ships. Pathetic. This would be easier than he thought. What he didn't see were the 50,000 fighters hiding in the shadows, or the automated weapons platforms scattered throughout the system, or the minefield that stretched across millions of kilometers of space, or the fact that every single human ship was prepared to die to protect their home. Admiral Sue Park commanded the human defense fleet from her flagship. She was old for a combat officer, but her mind was sharp and her resolve was iron. She opened a channel to all human forces. Remember Kepler 442b. Make them pay for every meter of space. No mercy, no prisoners. Send them to hell. The Velcron fleet advanced. They were confident, moving in textbook formation. Threnzak ordered his ships to fire when they reached optimal range. Thousands of plasma bolts lanced out toward the human fleet. The human ships scattered like birds. They didn't try to hold formation. They didn't follow any predictable pattern. Each ship moved independently, using thrusters in ways that seemed to violate physics. The Velcron fire hit mostly empty space. Then the humans returned fire. Not with energy weapons, but with kinetic rounds accelerated to a fraction of light speed. Solid metal slugs that punched through Velcron shields like they weren't there. 3 Velcron cruisers exploded in the first volley. Threnzak snarled in frustration. All ships pursue and destroy. They cannot escape us. That's when the minefield activated. Thousands of hidden mines suddenly came to life, their sensors locking on to Velcron ships. They didn't just explode. They were smart weapons, designed by human engineers who understood war in ways the Velcrons never had. Some released clouds of shrapnel that shredded hulls. Others were nuclear devices that created pulses of electromagnetic energy, frying computer systems. Still others were simply massive explosives that could crack a ship in half. The Velcron formation disintegrated into chaos. Ships tried to maneuver away from the mines, only to run into more mines. Threnzak watched in disbelief as 37 of his ships were destroyed in less than 5 minutes. Then Nari and her fellow pilots struck. 50,000 fighters came screaming out of the darkness, moving at speeds that should have killed their pilots. They swarmed over the Velcron fleet like angry wasps. Each fighter was small and fragile, but they moved in coordinated strikes that the Velcrons couldn't defend against. Nari locked onto a Velcron destroyer. Her fighter dove toward it, using the gravity of a nearby moon to slingshot herself forward. Missiles away. The destroyer's point defense systems tried to track her, but she was too fast, too unpredictable. Her missiles slammed into the ship's engine core. The destroyer broke apart, spilling atmosphere and bodies into space dot she didn't celebrate. She just moved on to the next target. Around her, thousands of other pilots did the same. The Velcrons were learning a terrible truth. Human pilots didn't care about their own safety. They would fly into suicide runs if it meant killing the enemy. They would ram their fighters into Velcron ships if they ran out of ammunition. Colonel Taiwan led the boarding teams. While the space battle raged, he and 500 special operations soldiers launched themselves at a Velcron command ship. They used magnetic clamps to attach to the hull, then burned through with cutting torches. Inside, they met Velcron soldiers for the first time in close combat. The aliens were larger and stronger than humans. They had natural armor plating and sharp claws, but they had never fought an enemy like humans before. Tay's soldiers used tactics that seemed insane to the Velcrons. They used grenades in enclosed spaces, willing to risk their own lives to kill the enemy. They set traps using their own wounded as bait. They fought in complete darkness, using enhanced vision systems while the Velkrans stumbled blind. And they showed no mercy whatsoever. When the Velkran soldiers tried to surrender, the humans shot them. When the Velkrans tried to retreat, the humans hunted them down. Tay had made it clear to his soldiers before the mission. These things murdered 2 million civilians. Every single one of them dies. No exceptions. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Velkran fleet had lost 120 ships. The survivors retreated in disorder, jumping to faster-than-light travel as quickly as they could. High Overlord Threnzak stared at his tactical display in shock. He had lost 40% of his fleet. The humans had shown capabilities he didn't know they possessed. But what disturbed him most was the brutality. The Velkrans were conquerors. They had fought countless wars. But they had rules. They took prisoners. They allowed surrender. The humans didn't either. They fought with a savagery that shocked even experienced Velkran soldiers. Back on Earth, Dr. Rin Choi stood in her laboratory, surrounded by weapons of terrible power. She was a small woman with gentle eyes, but her mind understood destruction in ways that frightened even her colleagues. On her workbench were designs for weapons the galaxy had never seen. Hellfire munitions. Kinetic impactors that could turn asteroids into planet-killing projectiles. Biological weapons tailored to Velkran physiology. Chemical agents that would make their soldiers choose death over continued existence. Nuclear devices small enough to fit in a backpack, but powerful enough to level a city. General Soong-Beek entered the laboratory. "Are they ready?" Rin nodded slowly. "Yes, but General, some of these weapons. If we use them, there's no going back. We'll be crossing lines that should never be crossed." Soong looked at her with tired eyes. They crossed that line when they murdered Kepler 442b. They wanted a war. They're going to get one. Prepare everything for mass production. Across human space, the industrial machine roared to life. Every factory, every shipyard, every manufacturing facility converted to war production. Civilian ships were retrofitted with weapons. Orbital stations became fortress. Entire asteroids were hollowed out and turned into hidden military bases. Counselor Yuri Kang addressed the human population from Earth. His speech was broadcast to every human settlement. Every ship, every outpost. The Velkrans think they can frighten us into submission. They think one massacre will break our spirit. They are wrong. They have awakened something in humanity that should have stayed sleeping. We will show them what humans do to those who hurt our people. We will show them why Earth breeds survivors. We will show them that declaring war on humanity was the last mistake their empire will ever make. The message was clear. Humanity had been pushed too far. The Velkrans wanted to see human fear. Instead, they were about to witness human rage. And rage, focused and refined into pure military purpose, was the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Commander Jin Seo had been floating in enemy territory for 3 weeks. His ship, the Silent Reaper, was designed by engineer Hai Lim to be almost invisible. No heat signature. No electromagnetic emissions. Just a dark shape drifting through space like a piece of debris. Inside, Jin and his crew of 40 lived in near total silence, breathing recycled air and eating cold rations. They were deep in Velkran space now, thousands of light years from human systems. Around them were dozens of other stealth ships, each one carrying death to the enemy. This was humanity's new strategy. If the Velkrans wanted conventional war, they would be disappointed. Humans were going to fight like ghosts. Jin watched through his viewscreen as a Velkran supply convoy passed nearby. 12 transport ships carrying weapons and ammunition to the front lines. They had minimal escort. The Velkrans still didn't understand what they were facing. They thought the war was happening at the borders of human space. They had no idea humans were already inside their empire. "Target the lead transport," Jin whispered to his weapons officer. "Single missile. Hellfire payload." The missile launched silently from the Silent Reaper's hull. It was small and cold, coasting on momentum rather than active propulsion. The Velkran ships never saw it coming. The missile struck the lead transport's reactor core and detonated. Dr. Rin Choi's Hellfire weapons were designed for maximum psychological impact. The explosion was massive, far larger than it should have been. The transport didn't just explode. It came apart in a bloom of white-hot plasma that engulfed two other ships in the convoy. The remaining transports scattered in panic, but it didn't matter. Jin's ship was already gone, slipping away into the darkness. Across Velkran space, similar attacks were happening every day. Human stealth ships appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before any response could be organized. Supply depots exploded. Communications arrays went offline. Troop transports simply disappeared, never arriving at their destinations. High Overlord Threnzek stood in his command center, staring at reports that made no sense. His empire was under attack, but he couldn't find the attackers. Velkran ships were being destroyed deep inside territory that should have been completely secure. Planets were experiencing raids from forces that seemed to materialize out of thin air. How are they doing this? He demanded of his intelligence officers. "Our sensors should detect any ship that enters our space. Our defenses should be impenetrable." One of his advisors, a veteran commander named Kelvax, spoke carefully. "Overlord, we are facing an enemy that does not fight the way we understand. They do not seek to hold territory. They do not engage in honorable battle. They strike from shadows and disappear. They fight like cowards." Threnzek slammed his fist on the console. "Then we will hunt them down. We will find their hiding places and destroy them." But the humans were already one step ahead. Colonel Tae-Wan led a mission to a Velkran military station orbiting a gas giant. His team of 200 soldiers approached in small pods that looked like space debris. When they were close enough, they used small thrusters to attach to the station's hull. The Velkran station housed 5,000 soldiers and served as a regional command center. It was heavily armed and supposedly impregnable. Tae-Wan and his team cut through the hull in 15 different locations simultaneously. They poured into the station like a flood. What followed was not a battle. It was a massacre. The humans had studied Velkran biology and psychology. They knew the aliens relied heavily on their eyesight and had poor hearing. So the humans fought in darkness, using night vision and sound suppression. They knew Velkrans valued individual combat prowess and fought in small groups. So the humans attacked in coordinated teams, using crossfire and overwhelming force. But most importantly, the humans understood terror. They didn't just kill the Velkran soldiers. They made examples of them. They left bodies in positions that would be found by other Velkrans. They used the station's communication system to broadcast the sounds of dying Velkran soldiers. They made sure the survivors knew exactly what had happened. When Tae-Wan's team left 3 hours later, only 200 Velkrans remained alive. He had allowed them to live specifically so they could spread the story. Before he departed, he broadcast a message through the station systems. "This is Colonel Tae-Wan of the Human Special Operations Command. Remember Kepler 442b. Remember our 2 million dead. Every Velkran soldier will pay for what your empire did. Every station, every ship, every world that serves your military will burn. We are coming for all of you. And we will not stop until your empire is nothing but ashes and memories." Back on Earth, General Sung-Beek reviewed the strategic situation with his staff. The war had been going on for 6 months now. The Velkrans still had superior numbers, but their morale was crumbling. Their supply lines were in chaos. Their soldiers were afraid to sleep. Admiral Sue Park reported from the front lines. "We've destroyed or damaged over 400 Velkran warships. Our losses are approximately 80 ships. The exchange rate heavily favors us, but we're running low on experienced crews." Soon nodded. "Continue the pressure. I want every Velkran soldier to feel like they're being hunted. I want them to fear the darkness of space. I want them to understand that they made a terrible mistake." Agent Yun Bei was one of humanity's deepest cover operatives. She had undergone extensive surgery to appear Velkran, modified her biology to pass their medical scans, and spent years learning their culture and language. Now she worked as a civilian administrator on a Velkran world, gathering intelligence. What she learned was disturbing. The Velkran Empire had decided to escalate. They were mobilizing their full military might. Over 5,000 warships were being assembled for a massive assault on human space. But more concerning was the intelligence about biological weapons. The Velkrans were developing diseases specifically designed to kill humans. EUN transmitted this information back to Human Command, then destroyed her communications equipment. She knew what would come next. If the Velkrans were escalating to biological warfare, humanity's response would be immediate and terrible. Dr. Rin Choi received the intelligence report and immediately went to work. Within 2 weeks, she had developed 3 separate biological countermeasures. But she didn't stop there. She also created human versions of biological weapons, tailored specifically to Velkran physiology. When she presented them to General Sung Beek, her hands were shaking. "General, these weapons are monstrous. They would cause suffering on a scale that's hard to imagine. If we use them, we become no better than the Volkrans." Sung looked at the data, his face grim. "Prepare them anyway. We may not use them, but the Velkrans need to know we have them. Deterrence is better than actual use." The war escalated further. Humanity deployed automated weapons platforms throughout Velkran space. These platforms were intelligent hunter-killers, programmed to seek out and destroy Velkran military assets. They couldn't be reasoned with or frightened. They simply killed over and over with mechanical efficiency. 3 Velkran core worlds came under simultaneous attack. Human ships appeared in orbit without warning, bypassed the defenses using tactics the Velkrans still didn't understand, and bombarded military installations from space. The attacks lasted less than 20 minutes each, but the damage was catastrophic. Millions of Velkran soldiers died. Critical infrastructure was destroyed. High Overlord Threnzak watched the reports with growing horror. His empire was the greatest power in the galaxy. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had never lost a war. But now, against this small species from 3 insignificant systems, they were being humiliated. He called an emergency council. His generals and advisors gathered, their confidence shaken. One of them suggested negotiation. Threnzak struck him across the face with enough force to draw blood. "We do not negotiate with inferior species." He roared, "We will destroy them utterly. Mobilize everything. Every ship. Every soldier. We will exterminate humanity. We will burn their worlds to cinders. We will make sure no trace of them remains." His advisors exchanged nervous glances, but said nothing. The order was given. The full might of the Velkran Empire would be brought to bear against humanity. 10,000 warships. The largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Back in human space, the news was received with grim determination. Counselor Yuri Kang addressed the military command. "They're coming with everything they have. This is it. The decisive battle." Commander Jin Seo called back from his deep space mission, stood in the briefing room with dozens of other officers. We've bloodied them. We've hurt them. But they still have the numbers. If they hit us with everything at once, can we stop them? General Soombeek smiled coldly. They think they're bringing everything. They think they're prepared. But they're not. They're about to walk into the greatest trap in human history. And when we're done, the galaxy will know. You don't declare war on humanity and survive. The Velcran Armada assembled at the edge of their empire. 10,000 warships, the largest military force in recorded galactic history. High Overlord Threnzak stood aboard his flagship, watching the fleet organize itself into battle formations. This was it, the final solution to the human problem. After today, humanity would cease to exist. He had learned respect for human tactics over the past months of war. They fought dirty, using tricks and traps. But numbers couldn't be denied. 10,000 ships against whatever ragged defense the humans could muster. The outcome was inevitable. Agent Yoon Bei watched the fleet from her hiding place on the Velcran station. She had sent her final intelligence report 2 days ago. The location of the Velcran homeworld, Velcros Prime, the coordinates of the assembled fleet, the projected jump point for their attack on Earth, everything humanity needed to know. She knew she wouldn't survive much longer. Her cover was starting to crack. Velcran security was asking questions. But she had done her job. The rest was up to the military dot on Earth. The debate raged in the emergency council chambers. Counselor Yuri Kang stood before the assembled leadership, his voice passionate. They're coming to exterminate us. Every man, woman, and child. They've made their intentions clear. The question isn't whether we fight back. The question is how far we're willing to go. Ambassador Hana Lee, who had tried so hard for peace in the beginning, spoke quietly. They killed Kepler 442b, 2 million innocent people. They've shown us what they do to civilians. If we don't stop them here, they'll do it to Earth, to every human world. We have no choice. General Soombeek activated a holographic display showing the Sol system. We've spent the last 6 months fortifying every approach to Earth. The Velcrons think they're walking into a simple battle. They're wrong. Operation Exodus isn't just a defensive plan. It's designed to end this war permanently. Admiral Supark stood up. We have the weapons. We have the capability. But we need to be clear about what we're doing. If we execute Operation Exodus as planned, we're not just defending ourselves. We're delivering a message to the entire galaxy. A message written in Velcran blood. The vote wasn't unanimous, but it was close. Operation Exodus was approved. Humanity would show the Velcrans exactly what happened when you declared genocide against Earth. Captain Dae Kim commanded the experimental warship Vengeance Protocol. His ship was unique, a testbed for humanity's most advanced and dangerous weapons. In his arsenal were Singularity missiles, weapons that created temporary black holes. The destructive power was almost incomprehensible. One missile could tear apart a planet. He had volunteered for this mission, knowing he might not survive it. The Vengeance Protocol was built for one purpose, to ensure that if humanity fell, it would take its enemies with it. But today, the mission was different. Today, they would use these terrible weapons not for revenge, but for survival. The Velcran fleet jumped into the Sol system right on schedule. High Overlord Threnzak expected to see a desperate defensive formation. Maybe a few hundred human ships trying to protect their homeworld. What he saw instead made him freeze. The Sol system was a fortress. Thousands of weapons platforms ringed every planet, every moon, every major asteroid. Each one bristled with railguns, missile launchers, and energy weapons. The space between planets was crisscrossed with sensor nets and automated defense drones. And waiting in formation were not hundreds of human ships, but thousands. Admiral Supark broadcast on all frequencies. High Overlord Threnzak, you came here to exterminate humanity. You're about to learn why that was impossible. The trap was sprung. The weapons platforms opened fire simultaneously. Thousands of railgun rounds, each one moving at relativistic speeds, slammed into the Velcron formation. Shields that should have held against any conventional weapon simply failed. The kinetic energy was too much, too focused. 30 Velcron ships exploded in the first 10 seconds. Threnzak screamed orders at his fleet, but the communications were jammed. Human electronic warfare had disabled his command network. Each Velcron ship was on its own, unable to coordinate with the others. Lieutenant Narration led her fighter squadron into the chaos. She had survived 6 months of constant combat, becoming one of humanity's most decorated pilots. Around her, 10,000 other fighters swarmed the Velcron fleet like locusts. They didn't try to destroy the massive warships. Instead, they targeted sensors, communications arrays, weapon systems. They blinded and crippled the enemy. Colonel Tae-1's boarding teams launched toward the Velcron flagship, Threnzak's own ship. They crashed through the hull in a dozen places, pouring into the vessel like a virus. The Velcron soldiers fought back desperately, but the humans were merciless and efficient. Tae himself led the team toward the bridge. They cut through bulkheads and blasted through security doors. When they reached the command center, they found Threnzak surrounded by his guards. The High Overlord was massive, nearly 3 meters tall and heavily armored. "You will not take me alive, human scum," Threnzak snarled, raising his weapon. Tae shot him in the leg. The High Overlord fell, howling in pain. "We're not here to kill you," Tae said coldly. "You're too valuable. You're going to watch what happens to your fleet. Then you're going to face justice for Kepler 442b. The battle lasted 17 minutes. That was all the time it took for humanity to destroy the greatest armada in galactic history. The Velcron fleet was torn apart by weapons they had never imagined. Kinetic impactors traveling at nearly light speed. Missiles that released clouds of microscopic drones that ate through ship hulls. And finally, Captain Dae Kim's singularity weapons. They had held back, waiting for the right moment. When the Velcron fleet tried to retreat, to jump away to safety, he fired 3 singularity missiles, each one creating a temporary black hole. The gravitational shear ripped through hundreds of Velcron ships, crushing them like tin cans. The surviving Velcrons, those few ships that could still maneuver, surrendered immediately. They had no choice. Their fleet was gone. Their commander was captured. And humanity had shown a level of destructive capability that terrified them. On Earth, Counselor Yuri Kang watched the battle data with mixed emotions. They had won, decisively, completely, but the cost in Velcron lives was staggering. Nearly 1 million soldiers dead, an entire fleet annihilated. General Sung-Beek stood beside him. This is what they forced us to become. They wanted to see human strength. They got it. Ambassador Hana Lee received a communication from the Velcron government. Not from Threnzak, but from the civilian leadership on Velcros Prime. They wanted to negotiate. They offered reparations, territorial concessions, anything humanity wanted. Hannah looked at the communication for a long moment and began drafting humanity's response. The terms were simple and non-negotiable. Complete and unconditional surrender. Every Velcron military asset to be turned over to human control. War crime tribunals for those responsible for Kepler 442b. Permanent restrictions on Velcron military capabilities. And oversight by human observers to ensure compliance. The Velcron government refused. Their pride wouldn't allow such humiliation. They still had their core territories, their homeworld, the remaining military forces. They believed they could continue the fight, wear down humanity through attrition. General Soong-Beek read their refusal and turned to his staff. They still don't understand. They think this is a normal war where both sides eventually negotiate. They need to learn. Admiral Sue Park, prepare the fleet. We're taking the war to Velcros Prime. Agent Yoon Bae, still deep in Velcron territory, received an emergency message through a hidden channel. It was a single word: evacuate. She knew what it meant. Humanity was done with half measures. The final strike was coming. She destroyed her remaining equipment and made her way to a stolen shuttle. As she left the station, she looked back at the Velcron homeworld below. It was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. Billions of Velcrons lived there, going about their daily lives, unaware of what was coming. She felt a moment of pity. Then she remembered Kepler 442b, and the feeling vanished. The Velcrons had chosen this path. They had started a war of extermination. Now they were going to see what extinction looked like. The human armada assembled. 5,000 warships, every available combat vessel. This wasn't a raid. This wasn't a defensive battle. This was an invasion. And at its head was Captain Dae Kim in the Vengeance Protocol, carrying enough firepower to crack a planet open. The message was simple and brutal: surrender or die. The Velcron Empire had one last chance to accept humanity's terms, or they would learn what humans did to those who murdered their children. The human armada arrived at Velcros Prime like an avenging angel. 5,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, surrounding the Velcron homeworld. On the surface, 8 billion Velcrons looked up at their sky and saw death hovering above them. Admiral Sue Park stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at the planet below. It was beautiful. Cities sprawled across the continents, connected by gleaming infrastructure. Oceans teemed with life. This was the heart of the Velcron Empire, the world that had launched 1,000 conquest fleets. She opened a channel that broadcast to every communications device on the planet. Every screen, every radio, every personal communicator. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold. People of Velcros Prime, this is Admiral Sue Park of the United Human Systems. Your government declared war on humanity. Your military murdered 2 million of our civilians at Kepler 442b. Your High Overlord ordered our extermination. Now your fleet is destroyed. Your military is broken. And we are here. On the planet below, panic began to spread. The Velcron government scrambled to respond. Emergency broadcasts told citizens to remain calm, that their defenses would protect them. But everyone could see the human ships in orbit. Everyone knew what those ships could do. General Soong-Beek stood in the war room on Earth, monitoring the situation. Beside him, Counselor Yuri Kang watched the tactical displays with tension evident on his face. They had the power to destroy Velcros Prime. The weapons were ready. One order and 8 billion Velcrons would die. We could end this right now, Yuri said quietly. One strike. Their homeworld gone. Their empire broken forever. Soong nodded slowly. Yes, we could. The question is whether we should. Ambassador Hana Lee entered the room. She had been working around the clock, coordinating with the few Velcron officials willing to talk. They're terrified. Their government is fracturing. Some want to surrender. Others want to fight to the last. But all of them know they're facing extinction. Captain Dae Kim, aboard the Vengeance Protocol, checked his weapons one last time. The Singularity missiles were armed and ready. He could fire them right now. Create black holes that would tear the planet apart. Kill billions in seconds. Part of him wanted to. For Kepler 442b. For the 2 million dead. for every human soldier who had died in this war, but he waited for orders. That was the difference between humans and the Vulcans. Humans understood discipline. They understood the chain of command. They didn't let rage make their decisions. High Overlord Threnzak sat in a human prison cell, watching the events unfold on a screen. His flagship had been captured, his fleet destroyed, his empire on the brink of annihilation. He had started this war confident in his superiority. Now he watched his homeworld surrounded by the very species he had called weak and primitive. Colonel Taiwan stood outside the cell. "How does it feel, Overlord? Knowing that your entire species might die because of your choices?" Threnzak said nothing. What could he say? He had gambled everything and lost. On Velcros Prime, the government finally broke. The military commanders who had urged continued resistance were arrested. The civilian leadership, those who had been overruled when the war began, took control. They sent an urgent message to Admiral Supark. "We surrender. Unconditionally. Please don't destroy our world." Supark read the message and forwarded it to Earth. The decision wasn't hers to make. This was bigger than any single commander. This was about what humanity would become. Would they be conquerors like the Velcrans? Or would they be something different? The debate in the council chambers was intense. Some argued for complete destruction. The Velcrans had shown no mercy. Why should humanity? Others argued that mercy was exactly what separated humans from their enemies. That destroying Velcros Prime would make humanity no better than those who had destroyed Kepler 442b. Ambassador Hannah Lee spoke last. Her voice was tired but steady. "We fought this war because the Velcrans tried to exterminate us. If we exterminate them, we prove they were right to fear us. We become the monsters they thought we were. But if we show mercy now, if we demonstrate that humans can be both powerful and just, we send a different message to the galaxy." The vote was close, but mercy won. Barely. Admiral Supark broadcast to Velcros Prime again. "Your surrender is accepted. But understand this. The Velcran Empire, as you knew it, is over. Your military will be dissolved. Your government will be restructured under human oversight. And those responsible for war crimes will face justice. You will learn to live in a galaxy where you are not the dominant power, where you must follow the same rules as everyone else." The relief on the planet below was palpable. People wept in the streets, not because they were happy, but because they were alive. They had come within moments of extinction and been spared. But humanity wasn't done. The trials began immediately. Every Velcran officer involved in the Kepler 442b massacre was arrested and brought before an international tribunal. High Overlord Threnzak was tried first. The evidence was overwhelming. He had ordered the attack. He had personally commanded the bombardment. 2 million deaths were on his hands. The sentence was unusual. Not death, not imprisonment. Instead, Threnzak was sent to Kepler 442b. He was given basic survival equipment and left on the ruins of the world he had destroyed. His task was simple: rebuild, plant trees, clear radiation, help make the dead world live again. He would spend the rest of his life repairing the damage he had caused. Dr. Rin Choi supervised the dismantling of Velcran weapons programs. What she found horrified her. The biological weapons they had been developing were worse than anything humans had created. Diseases designed to cause maximum suffering. Genetic weapons that would have destroyed human fertility. The Velcrans had been planning genocide on a scale that was hard to comprehend. She destroyed all of it. Every sample, every research note. And she made sure the entire galaxy knew what the Velcrans had been planning. The moral high ground shifted dramatically. Other species that had been watching the war with uncertainty now understood. Humanity hadn't started this fight. They had finished it. That 10 years passed. The Velkrin Empire was reorganized into a federation of independent worlds, all under human oversight. Their military was limited to defensive forces only. Human observers monitored their government, ensuring no return to aggressive expansionism. But something unexpected happened. The younger generation of Velkrins, those who had grown up after the war, didn't resent the humans. They saw how the occupation worked. Human administrators were strict but fair. Human technology was shared freely. Human culture, with its emphasis on individual rights and democratic governance, spread through the former Empire. Agent Yun Bei, who had survived the war and returned home, found herself back in Velkrin space. But this time as a diplomat, not a spy. She worked to build bridges between the two species. It was slow work. Trust didn't come easily after such a brutal war. But it was happening. Lieutenant Narration, now a captain, commanded a mixed human Velkrin squadron. Her wing included pilots from both species, working together to patrol the borders of the Federation. Some of her Volcron pilots had lost family in the war. Some had fought against her. But they flew together now, protecting their shared space. Commander Jin Co., promoted to admiral, oversaw the integration of Velkrin shipyards into the human industrial base. The Velkrins had advanced manufacturing techniques that complemented human design philosophy. Together, they were building ships better than either species could create alone. The galaxy watched all of this with careful attention. Other species, some of whom had considered attacking humanity, reconsidered. The humans had demonstrated overwhelming military power. They had shown they could destroy an empire that had stood for 12,000 years. But they had also shown restraint, mercy, justice. A new accord emerged, drafted by Ambassador Hana Lee and signed by 47 different species. The Human Accord. Its principles were simple: respect for sovereignty, protection of civilians, proportional response to aggression, and most importantly, humans would serve as guarantors of the peace. Any species that attempted genocide, that targeted civilians, that violated the basic rules of civilized warfare, would face human intervention. The Velkrins became the example, the lesson that echoed through the galaxy. You don't attack humans. You don't murder their civilians. Because if you do, they will come for you with unstoppable force. But if you surrender, if you accept justice, they will help you rebuild. They will make you part of something better. Captain Jay Huang, who had commanded the diplomatic vessel at the war's beginning, now captained a massive exploration ship. His crew was diverse, including humans, Velkrins, and a dozen other species. They were mapping new regions of space, making first contact with species that had never encountered the galactic community. When they met new civilizations, Jay always told them about the war, about Kepler 442b and Velcros Prime, about how humanity had been pushed to the brink and pushed back, about mercy and victory. He watched how the new species reacted, gauging whether they understood the message. "We don't want to conquer you," he would say. "We don't want to rule you, but we will protect our people and our allies. And if you threaten us, you'll learn what the Velkrins learned. Humanity is peaceful until we're not. And when we're not, we're the most dangerous thing in the galaxy." Admiral Sue Park retired after 15 years of service. She had commanded fleets, won battles, and helped build the peace that followed. On her final day, she stood before a memorial on Earth, a black wall inscribed with 2,311,847 names, every human who had died in the war. Kepler 442b's civilians, the soldiers and pilots and crew members who had fallen in battle. She placed her hand on the wall and whispered, "We won. And we didn't become monsters. I hope that's enough." General Soong Beek, now too old for active service, taught at the military academy. His students came from dozens of worlds. He taught them strategy and tactics. But more importantly, he taught them the lessons of the Vulcan War. We had the power to destroy them completely, he told his classes. We could have killed billions, but we chose mercy. Not because we were weak, but because we were strong enough to choose. That's what separates us from tyrants. The ability to choose mercy, even when vengeance is within our grasp. High Overlord Threnzak died on Kepler 442b 30 years after the war ended. He never left the planet, never asked for pardon. He spent 3 decades planting trees, cleaning water, rebuilding what he had destroyed. In his final years, he wrote a memoir. It was required reading in schools across the former Vulcan Empire. In it, he wrote, "I declared war on humanity, believing them weak. I was wrong. They were strong in ways I couldn't comprehend. But their greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It was their ability to remain human, even in the face of total war. They could have destroyed us. They chose to save us instead. That choice haunts me more than any punishment could. The galaxy changed. The old empires, those built on conquest and subjugation, quietly reformed themselves. No one wanted to be the next Vulcan Empire. No one wanted to learn the lesson the hard way, and humanity stood at the center of it all. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. The species that had been pushed too far and pushed back with devastating force. The species that had shown both overwhelming power and remarkable restraint. They became known across the stars as the Sleeping Titans. Peaceful in rest, unstoppable when awakened, merciful in victory. And every species in the galaxy understood the simple truth: you don't declare war on humanity. Because if you do, you'll face their wrath and their justice. And somehow, their justice is more terrifying than their wrath. Because it means surviving to face what you've done. It means living with the knowledge that you started a war against the most lethal species alive, and they let you live anyway.